Hi, good morning. Coming to you this morning from the Wooden Boat Building Museum in Winterton, Newfoundland. Wonderful, beautiful place, and they're trying to preserve the history of wooden boat building here, the centuries-long tradition of wooden boat building here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And so they've kindly allowed me to come and perform my recitation and record it here in the place where they're teaching all about building boats. And of course, my recitation, Pat's Dream, is a family story given to me by Cousin Bill, passed away now. I hope he's resting in peace. I hope he's with me this morning as I'm sharing this family story of my grandfather, Pat Short, from Kingston, Conception Bay, who was, of course, a boat builder, a fisherman and a boat builder. And this particular story takes place in the late 1930s. For a number of years, he and my father and one of my uncles would go to St. John's from Kingston, Conception Bay, and they'd be like the peddlers on the streets of Dublin and Belfast, you know, the fish peddlers. They would sell their fish right on the streets of St. John's. But this particular year, grandfather Pat decided he wanted to build a skiff that year. Now, this isn't a skiff, it's a punt, I believe, but similar kind of an idea. You get the idea. They had to build it, frame it up and build it out of timber, and they would come across the barrens from Conception Bay, where my grandfather was born and raised, to get the lovely timber that was so good for building boats over here in Trinity Bay. So anyway, I thought I would do that recitation for you today, and I called it Pat's Dream. Hope you enjoy it. What do fishermen dream, I wonder, when in their bunks at night? Do they dream of the perfect catch, when the wind and tide's just right? Or do they dream of boats and ships that ride upon the waves, the far-off distant places where they would like to sail? Maybe some dream of the boat that they would like to make, of the day that they would launch her and look behind at her wake. When Pat Short from Kingston, Conception Bay, that year in the middle of May, left home to fish out of Old St. John's, he rode into the tide that was coming on. He was already a fisherman and a sealer of some renown, and he said a skiff he'd make that year when snows were on the ground. In his mind's eye, he could see her, that sturdy wooden boat, made from Trinity Bay timbers that would keep her afloat. They would shape her and deck her and caulk her seams, that 28-foot skiff that he saw in his dreams. An Acadia engine would drive her. Somehow they would find a way to buy. Between the fishing and the sealing, they would give it a try. But for that summer, he and sons Fance and Phil would head out of St. John's Port to catch fish on the grounds off Logie Bay or Blackhead, those strong, hard-working shorts. They would peddle their fish on the streets of the old town. They were Newfoundland small boatmen, by then of world renown. The stink of fish was in the air in the downtown streets so grand, but they knew that it was the smell of money in this land. The summer came and went, and when fall was on the wind, it was time to head around Cape St. Francis, back to their Conception Bay home again. The fish was all sold, and the money it did bring had to last them through the cold weather until sealing in the spring. They bought and stowed the needed winter supplies. Pat had enough cash for one more thing to buy. Every year he'd head back home with a bottle of rum and share a drink with his brother Will, the older one. But the dream of the new skiff was fresh upon his mind, and for that he needed to buy a plane to shape and sculpt and rind. He only had enough money for one thing or the other. Would he buy the plane to build the boat, or the rum to share with his brother? At the shop where they sold the Stanley tools, he saw the plane, sharp and handy. He held her in his hands and admired her, for she was a dandy. What he could do with her that winter as he shaped the skiff. His fisherman's hands were strong and his fingers thick. He knew that they would go across the barrens to cut the lumber in late fall, and with the pit saw in the meadow, well, they would split it all. His eye would find the right curves in the spruce trees in the groves. They would rend their fine creation between Kingston and Spout Cove. He would teach his sons the way of working with the wood and, like a sculptor, shape the boat as his father taught him he could. But at the bond store, he could almost taste that sweet dark rum. He could smell the satisfaction of a fishing season done. He walked up and down Water Street on two minds. Which one would he choose? What way was he inclined? The bottle of rum was calling him back to the bond store, that once a year elixir that could his soul restore. It spoke to him of Christmas when the men would pass the bottle round, and he'd say his favorite recitation, and they'd sing of the holy ground. The day was wearing on. His time was growing short. They soon would have to leave and head out of St. John's Port. His choice it must be made. The time was drawing nigh. What way would he decide, his uncertainty running high? So in the end, Pat chose the plane and left the rum behind. He was a man of action, the practical, working kind, and he could get by that winter without that bottle of rum, and Will would surely understand why he came back home with none. And when the winter came and they built that sturdy skiff, his mind was clear and steady, even if his joints were stiff. As they shaped the boards and planed them, as they caulked those wooden seams, she came alive before his eyes, that boat he saw in dreams. They bought the Acadia engine, of that he was so proud. The sealing money would pay her off over the years, he allowed. And when they launched her in late spring, on a freshening wind and rising tide, he had made the right choice that day. Pat knew it deep inside. They pushed her off the beach, the first run on her to make. Then he cast his eyes out over the horizon, and he looked behind at her wake. What do fishermen dream, I wonder, when in their bunks at night? Do they dream of the perfect catch when the wind and tide's just right? Or do they dream of boats and ships that ride up on the waves to far off distant places that they would like to sail? Maybe some dream of the boat that they would like to make, of the day that they would launch her and look behind at her wake. Pat's dream. Thank you very much for listening. So glad that you joined in and watched my YouTube page. Remember to look up the Wooden Boat Museum in Winterton, Newfoundland. It's a fabulous place. Come visit if you're in the area. Check them out online, and thank you so much for the staff here and the board of the Wooden Boat Museum for allowing me to come and record this recitation. It means so much to me. You can hear this and other recitations accompanied by some local Newfoundland music on my album, Molasses and Homemade Bread. Check it out on iTunes and Spotify and Amazon Music and all those great places. And I hope you've enjoyed this today, and share it with your friends. Want to get those Newfoundland stories out there. Thanks so much, guys. Everybody stay safe and take care.